Today, I wanted to go over some of Strinova's better optimizations, both in terms of settings and also graphics, and things that you can avoid so that you don't have such a hard time playing or getting used to Strinova, especially if this is your first FPS. The first thing we want to go to is, well, into the settings, and we want to talk about the minimap. Now, you've probably heard a couple people talk about the importance of the minimap, and in case you're curious, the reason why it's so important is because if you take a look at the minimap here on the top right, you can obviously see a bunch of different information and I guess just information in general that you'll need in order to make informed decisions, both in terms of pushing, in terms of fighting, and anything in between. Now, the thing is that normally if you have the settings at default, which I actually set all of my settings back to default, the map is not nearly as big as it could be, or honestly should be, for how impactful the information is on it. Now, to be absolutely clear, even with me peering over for a second and then looking away, you can still see footprints of, or kind of get an image, or kind of get like an after image of where the enemies are on screen. And this isn't even talking about if you have allies that are also seeing vision. Just as a small kind of side note, in case you're curious about how information or how the minimap works, both the information from you and your allies get transmitted onto the minimap in real time. So that means that even if you aren't the one that's directly looking at these enemies right now, your allies can also help you and, well, give you information when you're not in range or in view of certain characters. Now, that's the reason why a lot of people like the minimap to be so big. A couple settings that I've seen people hover around is roughly the 1.5 to maybe 1.75 minimap size, with a minimap zoom of 1.8. Now, the thing is that the 1.8 size is nice because, again, you don't need to see every single minute detail when it comes to, your your overall map, rather. And in that case, even if you're taking a look at what's on screen right now, though it is a little bit more difficult at times, and you do get a little bit of crowd, or, I guess, clutter on your screen, the value that you have from, for instance, now being able to see as many details as possible is quite nice. Ultimately, though, if you want to make the minimap zoom or the minimap itself more of a preference thing, that's totally fine as well. Now, there are some things in privacy, which, again, I think are also mostly for, well, your discretion and for your preference. Things like privacy protection and Spectre privacy protection are both fine if you're, don't want to get OPGG'd, or if you don't want to get looked up and things of this nature. But also things like the friend recommendation and things like that are really, really annoying. And in that case, I'd actually recommend you turn it off. Even if you aren't friends with these people, or even if you weren't directly messaged by these people, they'll frame or phrase it in a way that it seems like they decided to add you, and that's why I turned this off. Now, there are some other things in terms of voiceover and such that you could also change if you're interested, alongside subtitles. But the other thing I want to talk about is the match interface. Now, personally, I actually don't like the both option for the damage display. Rather, I actually prefer the overlay, specifically because I want to see how much damage I'm doing, but I don't need each and every single hit to tell me how much damage I'm doing in totality. That feels a little excessive and feels like even more screen bloat, which I don't think is something that you actually need. And rather, I also like changing the enemy outline, although that's, again, something that you can adjust or cater to whatever you specifically want. I saw one individual that was playing Strinova for a little while that was playing with yellow, and for whatever reason, I felt like that felt the most comfortable for me. But in addition to the outlines, you can also remove things like the glide effect. And honestly, this is okay because, again, although it does sound like you'd remove your own glide effects, and they even make the glide effects in certain cases or you have to pay for some of these glide effects in the store, this glide effect option doesn't turn it off for yourself. It only turns it off for enemies, and I guess if you really want to flex on people, you can keep them on. But otherwise, if you have a really flashy glide effect, it just makes you more noticeable or more visible to the enemies. Now, the other thing that we need to talk about is mouse smoothing, and to be honest, this is something that you should turn off no matter what. Truth be told, I don't think most people know exactly what the mouse smoothing does, and it is more of like a touch and go and feel and go kind of thing. But mouse smoothing in most, if not all, FPSs has historically been bad, and in that case, I don't think it's worth it for you to have it on. Now, the next thing we can talk about is the the controls or the control scheme for the game, you'll notice that there are a couple things that are turned on and off, including sprint, auto sprint, etc. Now, these are all subject to change, or you can change these however you like. If you're not familiar with or comfortable with rather something like left control, you could always swap it to whatever button you want it to be, whether that's shift or something in between. But on that note, you can also change the sidestepping mode, or the paper mode as people like to call it, from either hold or glide to toggle. Now, these are both fine, but I also think that there are a lot of people that don't like specifically the auto jump on wall stick. Now, as we actually, I forgot to turn this back to default, I just realized, but as we turn this back to default, sidestepping mode, excuse me, and glide mode are both on toggle by default. Personally, I like them on hold, specifically because, well, if I need to go back into the mode, I'll just press the button again. I don't need to be locked into like a minor animation where I have one or the other active at all times. And that's the same thing for auto jump on wall stick. If I want to wall stick, or if I want to jump for whatever reason, I will just, well, walk up and press it again. And that's total. Oh, not on this wall, I guess. Huh? This isn't a... Oh, it's one of these walls. My apologies. If I wanted to jump up for whatever reason, well, I could just press E and get up like that instead of... And in most cases, this isn't that big of a deal. However, if you are someone that likes to, like, peek over or jump, this will be really nice because, well, you actually have control over your character, as opposed to what would normally happen if you turn this on, which is when you jump, even without me pressing, you'll just have to trust me. It just... As you near the top of the wall, it'll just jump for you. Now, again, these are all mostly control settings, or mostly based on controls. You don't want some of these things to be turned on simply because you don't want to, well, peek your head up for no reason, just because you accidentally pressed W while you were on the wall. And in that case, that's pretty much all you need to know specifically for the movements. In terms of combat and stuff, if you aren't familiar or aren't comfortable with something like shoulder fire on left shift, you could also change it to other buttons. However, you can also change this to hold or toggle as well. The ADS mode has the similar sort of situation going on where you can change it between toggle and hold. Again, these are more honestly like specific to you kind of optimizations or changes. However, I don't really think that most of these are worth changing in most cases, unless if you're obviously trying to change like the toggles. Changing the controls I think are fine, but these are honestly pretty industry standard for, well, any sort of shooters in general. Now, for most other things here, again, you could also change some of these just because there are some that feel a little bit out of place in terms of where they are. If you're someone that isn't super familiar with, or I guess okay with controls like upgrade menu or whatever, again, all these can be changed. But the final thing I want to talk about is the sensitivities. Now, personally, I've seen plenty of different sort of shooters where you have high sensitivities and low sensitivities. If you're playing games that have typically lower or shorter time to kills, aka games like Valorant or Counter-Strike, where every single bullet counts and it feels like you're mostly peeking corners or holding corners and having your crosshair over certain walls, then in that case, it actually makes more sense for you to have a lower sensitivity. However, with a game like, Strinova, as you can see, you're constantly jumping around and you have to account for different abilities and different angles and such. It feels more like Apex Legends. And although there are still a lot of players that will use a higher sensitivity or a lower sensitivity with something like Apex, I found that if you want to do a lot of like the weird wacky tech in this game, including like running across walls, wall peeking, or like peeking over certain cliffs and stuff like that, it feels like you need a little bit more flexibility or a little bit higher sensitivity. However, sensitivity is never really something that I think most people need to care about. It's always usually just to your own preference. There isn't, I would say, a one-size-fits-all kind of answer to that specifically. The final thing I want to talk about is the crosshair, and in case you didn't know, you can actually change all of your crosshair settings directly in here. Now, again, personally, I'm more of a fan of the dot, specifically when it comes to the crosshair. I would probably also change it to green for me specifically. I think green stands out a little bit more than white. However, I think in general, I think having the more brighter color schemes for crosshairs will do you very kindly. And also, I think that depending on how depending on how intense or how specific you want to go down with it, there are of course a bunch of different settings to adjust, like the length, the thickness, the offset, etc. If you guys have ever done anything like aim labs, or if you've ever even played something like Counter-Strike, there are plenty of maps and plenty of settings that, or things that will remind you of this, because, well, crosshairs are pretty important, honestly, for this game and all first-person shooters. Now, in case you're wondering, the last thing we'll go into, or well, I guess these last two sections are more visual, and these are not so preferential, although again, it kind of comes down to your PC, which is why I think things become a bit easier or harder depending on how well or how good or bad your PC is. However, I actually don't really like things like shadows. I don't like having things like anti-aliasing at max, because you don't want things to be blurrier. Anti-aliasing, if you're not familiar with, by the way, reads as basically a smoothing for character designs for basically the environment and anything in between. So in that case, having anti-aliasing off is kind of not worth it, and then instead, or having it on rather, is not really worth it, and instead having it off I think will allow you to have more jagged edges, which might not look that nice, but also makes things more noticeable to see. The final thing I want to talk about from this section, though, is going to be the bloom and such. Bloom, just in general, alongside effect quality, makes things really nice for showcases, or, you know, if you're trying to make a montage. But in reality, when you're trying to actually shoot down someone from across the map, you don't want the blurriness of fire and stuff, or even the blurriness of fire next to you to kind of I guess, hinder your vision for whatever reason. Again, I understand that it looks pretty cool, but traditionally having things like this make no sense, especially when you're trying to be as competitive as possible. And that leads us to, well, sound. Now, the thing is that there are a lot of players that will argue that the audio output can be good, bad, or the other thing. HRTF is 3D sound or surround sound via your headphones. And the thing is that there are certain players that will argue that HRTF is good for other games, and it helps you with footsteps and trying to figure out where people are directionally. However, because of where the map is and because of the vision that you provide and stuff like that, it feels like this is a little bit weirder or more of a gray area. Personally, I've seen that headphones and stereo works out totally fine, but I also feel like because you don't actually have that many, you don't make any sound, or very minimal sounds, when you end up in this paper mode and people like to, you know, kind of crawl around, and because there's so much firing and there's so many explosions, flashbangs, etc. that go on in this game, the audio is more up to you. Like, honestly, I haven't seen too much of a difference. Like, if you peek, and if you hear someone throw a flamethrower at you, well, you're on fire. So use the audio settings as you will. But yeah, in case you're also curious, there is push to talk in this game. There is also squad voice chat. And yeah, that's pretty much all I have for you guys today. Those were the most important settings that I found specifically for Strinova. If you're also curious, this is the range you can get through here from the lobby, and it's also really nice for testing out things. And if you're curious about your settings, if you want to test out your crosshair and such, you can all do that here. And yeah, there's a lot of settings, a lot of customization, etc. Anyways, guys, that was my first Strinova video. I apologize if I had to go over some things more on the fly. I didn't have like a script for this specifically, but I'm really excited and have been playing Strinova for quite a while now. If you guys enjoyed today's video, make sure to check out the rest of my socials, which I'll link in the description. But yeah, if you guys want to see more or are curious about Strinova, feel free to let me know. But yeah, thanks again for watching. I'll see you guys on the next one. Stay safe, stay healthy. Oh, I can spin around to the front. Adios.